Sorry, I haven't worked through this and there's quite a delay on this. Well, I'll jump right into why do we need this? The justification is clear, and it's been adopted by a number of multiple planning documents, as you can see here. The community has really embraced this project, and we've shown that the need is there and that we will have the use for it.
It's got a delay.
Can you guys just change the slides if I?
You want to go back one? There you go.
So as you can see here, that these are the project benefits, but there's a lot more than this. Obviously, sustainability, everyone's seeing the fuel surges right now, the cost of fuel, and there's gonna be a lot more people probably riding their bikes and walking across this bridge because of all the recreation enhancements for this, as well as jobs on both sides of the river. It provides an essential link to the West Ashley Greenway. And right here, we're depicting where, does not work on the pointer. This is the current alignment of the bridge. This ties in at Lockwood, and you see across the Ash River alongside the southern bridge, and then ties into Folly Road and eventually onto the Greenway right there. This is a depiction of what the bridge may look like. This is a cable stay in the middle, but it's what's called a bobtail swing because it needs to have a movable span. And you can see this is in the open position where you see the cables. It's a little difficult to see that, but that's in the open position pointing toward the south there to allow boat access. The project includes other benefits as well too, enhancements to additional links for the Greenway to access the Greenway and then onto the Ashley River Bridge. Here is just a rough schedule. This has been updated a couple of times, but you kind of jog from the top to the bottom as you see there. There's a couple of very instrumental pieces. The first caption up there is the draft RFP and the grant agreement, which is currently under review by Federal Highways. Once we receive a cursory review of that, we'll be releasing it to the industry. Currently, there's 2 design build teams that are pre-qualified to review this. After they reviewed it, we're going to issue the final RFP later in the summer. We should have our permits in hand, and then we'll be, hopefully we'll be meeting our obligation date in September, which is really that grant deadline. And then on to submittal of design build cost proposals and award a design build contract in March of next year. This is a slide that we had showed fairly recently. It's updated though. This is really the funding summary. So we went through a risk-based cost analysis, which you see at the very bottom there. And that basically has gone through and looked at all the escalation factors for different materials out there to prepare what we think this bridge is going to cost in this time of escalation right now. You see all the different funding partners, and most recently, through the hard work of City Hall, Councilmember Seekings, we have retained additional funding, which is actually through Federal Highways and DOT, but it comes to us via the COG, the Council of Governments, and that's an additional $14 million. In order to meet that 41.2 budget at the bottom there, we are requesting the City of Charleston for an additional $1 million to be added to this project budget to meet that risk-based cost estimate. So tonight, there is a resolution coming to council requesting the acceptance of those funds from Federal Highways and DOT via the COG in addition to a resolution from the city of Charleston for an additional $1 million. And that's the caption of the bridge, a little bit more up close there with the bridge closed. And with that, that's the end of the update.
Thank you for that presentation. Any members of the committee have any questions? Yes, Councilmember Parker.
Has the city contributed any money to this as of yet?
Go back to the funding slide.
Or I'm sorry, I mean, I know, but nothing's been spent yet. Sorry, can you rephrase that?
So we have the project team is on board, HDR engineering team, and they have been preparing what's called 30% level documents. Those documents, in addition to some other things, specifications, the RFP, the request for proposal, they are under contract to provide all of that, and we're pretty close to the end of that. So yes, some funds have been spent already on that.
Do you know a dollar amount?
It's roughly in the neighborhood of 2 million.
Total contract, 2 million.
$1.3 million spent to date of a approximately $2 million contract.
All those are city funds?
Yes.
I just add that those funds do apply to our match. So they're part of match funds.
Yes, and typically in a grant like this, federal government wants you to spend the match money first and then the grant money second.
Councilmember Seeking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just we've gotten fairly regular updates on this project, as you all know. And the one thing that's changed significantly since the last time we all got together is this slide right here. And I just want to sort of emphasize how good a position we are in today as opposed to where we were the last time we got an update on this project. Because you might remember, one of the things that Mr. Most and others told us the last time is that we were trying to move the project, scale it back a little bit, do some cost engineering and all those things to meet what we then thought was the amount of monies we had in terms of a budget, which was not, by the way, 41.25 million. It was around 30 million, plus or minus, maybe even a little bit less. So what happened in the meantime is you might remember that the mayor issued a challenge and he actually stepped up to the plate and accepted that challenge himself. After we had the presentation, and it was our first meeting in January, our last meeting in December, when we knew we had some budgeting challenges and we had to present to the granting entity our full budget for this project before it could go forward or jeopardize the grant monies. The challenge was put out there to go find some money to bridge the gap, literally. And so through the hard work of a lot of people, the mayor, Mitchum at the COG, Secretary Hall from the DOT and others, a concerted effort was made to bring this project to those entities, the CDOT, the COG, the policy committee for chats. And through that process, an additional $14 million was put towards this project. Not a dime of which, by the way, is city money. It's not a loan to the city. It's monies that we will not owe any back. So this is a project that's super important. It's very popular. It was until about a month ago underfunded. It is now funded, save that last $1 million piece. And if for another $1 million, we can get this, and it's not a scaled back project. It's not value engineered. It's a 21-foot span. It's all the things that we want. It will be a marquee project. What's happened in the last 30 days has been nothing short of miraculous in the terms of government, not just because of the amount of monies that came, but how quickly that happened. So I want to give a shout out to the mayor for getting in there and mixing it up, which he did in short order. Gave a great presentation to the Chats Policy Committee who voted for that extra $14 million unanimously. Mr. Most gave an incredible presentation to the secretary when she came down for a meeting with us. And so it was really a good piece of salesmanship for a very worthy project. So I don't want that to be lost on anybody. Mr. Most has been very understated about this. What's happened is really pretty dramatic. And we're in a great position to bring this project to bear in a very short order compared to how long we've been working on it. I think that's a sort of fair assessment, Mr. Mayor.
Well,
Mayor Tecklenburg.
thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that acknowledgement. And the groundwork was really done in January when I visited Secretary Buttigieg and his staff in Washington, they're very supportive of this project. And it just so happened the next week I had an appointment with Secretary Hall in Columbia, and I got to give her a lot of credit. You know, we discussed with her the possibility that, yeah, we could really chop this thing down and have what might be called a second class product. And she was very definitive in supporting maintaining the full proposal, the full size, and making this a signature event, not just for us, but for our ability in the future to get future federal and state support. So she really, of course, it's mostly federal money, but she helps direct it. And it was her leadership that helped get that on the COGS agenda. Now, I did want to mention that since all this came together, we also got, as I mentioned, the folks in Washington are very supportive of us. They gave us a request to apply for some unused grant money. We may pick up another $2 or $3 million from another source in DC for this, in which case we can just, you know, make some adjustment and maybe even be able to downward adjust our city contribution. But having been said that, you don't really even know the final price tag until we get this thing finally engineered and designed and put it out for bid. Isn't that right? So this is all estimate. So we need to keep all the tokens in the pot. And we're even working to get a few more and play this thing on out until we can get to a contract to finish the design and build a bridge. And this one step today will get us moving in that direction. I'm told that the folks with Federal Highways and DOT are literally just waiting for this approval tonight. And they've already been asked to give an expedited review to our submission, and we're ready to send it to them with council's approval. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anyone else on the committee have any questions or comments? All right, if not, thank you, Edmund, for that presentation. And I will move on to item number 4 on the agenda, a presentation for CARTA on the transit and bus stop design guidelines.
I'm John Dotson. I'm a senior transit planner with CARTA. I appreciate y'all having us here. This is an informational item. These are the bus stop and design guidelines that were developed over the last about a year and a half or so. And essentially what we're looking at here is I'm going to give you guys just a very quick overview, kind of how the project came to be, highlights of the document itself, and then what's next. If you guys have questions about any slides in this, please feel free to interrupt me. My feelings will not be hurt. So this is the CARTA system. It's about 860 stops. We've got 25 routes, including fixed route services, express services, parking rides, downtown shuttles. We've got an on-demand service. We've got some Telluride for the area. And then we've got the LCRT that's in motion as well. The origin for the guidelines themselves, it was kickstarted from the ordinance that the city of Charleston actually put together. So looking at providing transit accommodations along existing or planned bus routes in 2019. And that was helped speed up the process of installing stops. It had been a little bit slow. It got mired down. And so we're looking at ways and kind of speeding that up and making it more streamlined. And guidelines were the next natural step for that. From just an early success stories specific to that ordinance, looking at the overall percentage of improvements made through the ordinance. So this slide basically shows you the percentage of pads, the percentage of benches, and the percentage of shelters within the overall system. And that percentage at the bottom shows those the percentage of improvements that were made due to the ordinance. So that was developer funded improvements. So that's money that was spent to improve the transit system from developers that could also be spent now elsewhere within the system. So it's just, it shows kind of the success of that ordinance as it was written. So bus stop guidelines, they're kind of the gateway to how we look at the transit system. You drive by the road, you see stops on the road. It's a good thing to kind of see the overall health of the city and the agency itself. So these are meant to help improve those stops. The document itself is also intended to be flexible. So this could always change as city ordinances change, rules, guidelines, policy. These are not meant to override anything that any city or municipality does. These are simply meant to complement existing rules, ordinances, laws, and to complement that process. These were overall also intended with different audiences in mind. So these are written for community members. These are written for staff level. These are written for municipal staff level outside of CARTA. And they're also written for developers. It's external, internal reference. There's appendices within the document itself that give you a lot of detail in terms of kind of the overall process for getting stop changes made. For example, in this situation, if you're a community member, there's charts within that that highlight that, and it tells you kind of the process that you would need to take to get a stop improvement made, and then the contact information at the bottom, and how to sort of get that process rolling. Staff level, we've got images like this to the right as well, which help quickly kind of detail what the elements at individual stops are. It gives you height of stops. I know right now we've got stops within the system that are sometimes on posts, sometimes on poles, sometimes on walls, and we're trying to kind of like get that standardized so that it's very clearly recognizable as a stop itself. The guidelines themselves, how they came to be, it was a lot of background work behind the scenes with a lot of different players. We worked with area municipalities across the area, worked with SCDOT, worked with the county. We had community members as well. So we had worked with MUSC, Charleston Moves, Track, which is a kind of a local focus group for the system itself. ULI, Chamber of Commerce. We had a lot of people that kind of got together every 2 months, talk through what we're kind of hoping for with these guidelines, how they would be used, and then the overall benefits and kind of what we hoped everybody would get out of them. There was a lot of technical work behind that as well. So we looked at various area plans within the area, looked at the kind of the regulatory framework. So looking at various laws that might impact how these would be developed, looked at other peers, and just kind of an array of details that kind of helped develop these. So the guidelines themselves from a highlight standpoint, there's actually 8 chapters, but it's cut off and that's okay. So this just gives you a general chapter overview. So we're looking at, it's the general introduction, state placement, typologies, amenities, and it kind of gives you a breakdown in terms of what the elements within the system are specific to stops, and how those would be kind of developed. So we also had principles, design principles. So, we didn't want, as stops are being placed, shelters, benches, et cetera, wanted to make sure that they had worked with the city, the area that were being put within to make sure that those fit. So like, for example, with City of Charleston, what we can do in the historic district and what the guidelines do is different than what you would do outside in West Ashley. And the guidelines accommodate those needs as well. This is more details on kind of the stop types. So you're looking at far side, mid block, near side, and that's just in reference to where the stop would be placed relative to an intersection. These are the various typologies that were kind of built within the system itself. So we've got transit centers, just basic stops, park and rides, and these are all kind of accommodated within the guidelines. And this just shows you the various elements that could occur at various typologies. Because what you would have at a basic standard stop is not necessarily the same as you would have at a transit center. This is just an example of what a landing pad would look like relative to the sidewalk, relative to the road, and then a sign that kind of gives you the just general overview. And that's something that is within the guidelines so that when a developer comes in looking to put in a business and it happens to be on a transit route, these can be handed to that developer. They could reference these and kind of in dealing would speed up that entire process. Again, this is sort of the details of what the steps would be if you wanted to remove or add or just change amenities. And depending on what your audience is, kind of those access points would be different. This is an example of, and granted, this is in North Charleston, but it is an example of kind of the stop itself and then the various elements and then an associated cost with each of those elements. So it just gives the developers and whomever else may be putting in a stop a better sense of what those cost impacts may be. There's also various checklists within the document itself. So either checklists from the developer standpoint, even from internal for CARTA, there's checklists to make sure that when stops are being installed, that we're doing everything correctly and doing it on a consistent basis. What's next from these? We're essentially just kind of, this is informational, and ideally down the road, we're looking to get further adoption and making sure the cities are okay with these as structured. And that's the extent of what we have thus far.
Thank you for that. Does anyone on the committee have any questions? Yes, Councilmember Parker.
Thank you, Councilmember Brady. So I understand that this is a sort of a tool that you can give to the new developers, because I've seen these pop up when we have new construction on James Island, and maybe you can get with me after, but how do we go about as a city, our existing structures, how do we improve upon them? Same process?
So these are written from the transit standpoint, and they are meant to complement city rule policies and not override anything.
Okay, so basically, I mean, how do we improve our bus stops on James Island?
Got it. Okay, so that would be just a conversation with the agency itself and kind of go through
Okay.
the process. Yeah, there's ultimately with this, there's going to be bus stop prioritizations, and that's going to take in various elements and kind of come up with a scoring rubric. We're working with that process now as we get our APCs, or automatic passenger counters, on the bus, and it kind of helps give weight to those scores.
Okay.
And as that gets finalized, that'll give us a chance to really finalize the stop improvements throughout the system.
Okay, when do you think that will be?
All, I say that with somewhat confidence.
Okay, because we have bus stops that don't have benches,
Correct, yeah.
you know, I mean, that's something we can improve upon.
We can still do that
fall.
in the room. Yeah, if there's a need for things and we see there's a lot of activity, we can kind of look at it on a case by case basis. And if we have the resources, we can make some changes to make things better.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Seekings.
So just briefly, Mr. Chairman, John, can you go back to that slide where you had the full stop there and the cost associated with it?
Yeah.
There. So just in response to Councilmember Parker, three things, but the two most important things are space and money for stops. And if you want something that looks like this, which is the full blown stop with shelter, what are we in on all that, John? It's somewhere in the $40,000 range by the time you actually build a stop like that, and you have to have land to do it and space off. So it is, I can just tell you, we know someone who knows someone who's very interested in making sure we make the stops as user-friendly as is humanly possible. And some go from non-user friendly to very user-friendly. We want to bridge that gap. So if you've got in your district stops in specific, just let the agency know, and we will put it on the list. But again, it's largely a function of funding and then space.
So I just have, and maybe it's not in your bailiwick, but I noticed on the service map, I represent Johns Island. And I don't think CARTA, other than Telluride, extends service there, but with the rapid growth that we know, especially from the census data, if there was any projection in the future that we could see beautiful bus stops eventually make their way onto Johns Island.
We have gotten that request. We do not have a set timeline for that. We do have Tri-County Link, which serves that stretch as well. Not as well as CARTA would serve it. But.
Okay.
And just in response to that too, Mr. Chairman, I mean, the numbers are what the numbers are and they're dramatic. I mean, clearly we need to get service out there. One of the challenges we have with adding service is we want to make sure we don't take any routes away. And equipment is a big part of it. And we've spent the last 4 or 5 years doing a complete equipment replacement project, which has been successful. So successful that we've actually gotten ahead of our technology. We have battery electric buses now that we can't charge because we can't get the switching equipment because of supply chain issues. So, but we're acutely aware of the needs on Johns Island. There's lots of them, one of which is for transit, and we'll be looking really closely at that. I mean, island travel has increased. One of the things we did 2 years ago, maybe, John, or 3 now, is we doubled the frequency of the Route 31 on James Island, and the ridership went through the roof. When the headways went from an hour and 15 minutes to 40 or 45 minutes. So we get it. We need to get out there sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Anyone else on the committee? All right, if not, thank you for your presentation.
Thanks, John.
All right, I will move on to agenda item 5, which is near and dear to my heart, the Sanders Road traffic signal and sidewalk project updates.
Well, good evening, everyone. Couple of quick updates on those 2 projects. The Sanders Road at Bees Ferry Road traffic signal project. Charleston County is working on that currently. They put it out to bid late last year, and they are currently waiting on the mast arms, the decorative signal poles, to be delivered. Those are expected to be delivered in October of this year. And hopefully the signal will be completely constructed by the end of this year. So looking at the end of 2022 for that to be completed. The other project is the Sanders Road sidewalk, which connects Half Shell Lane to the new C.E. Williams Middle School. That project is going through its last round of DOT comments. So it will hopefully get permitted soon. And then they're estimating 3 to 6 months to start. And probably a 90 to 120 day construction period. So
What month would that kind of put that in, do you think, if you had to ballpark with, a 50% confidence level?
so it's a little bit hard to tell. One of the issues they're having is with concrete pipes, which we've heard a couple of times today. So delivery of those might be an issue. So hopefully by the end of 2022, but don't hold me to that quite yet.
Okay. Because I know just especially with school getting ready to wrap up, people were anxious to know whether it was going to be completed by the time for school to get started. So it sounds like it's going to be a little bit longer than that.
I would say so, a little bit longer than August of next year.
Okay. All right. Anyone else? Probably not. All right. Thank you. All right. Is there anything else for the good of the order that any committee members or Mr. Mayor you'd like to bring up?